Welcome back, and in today's video we're going to cover one of the most important positions in any Rook endgame, the Lucena position. We're going to talk about what it is, we're going to look at two examples of how it applies in real Rook endgames, so you can see how it applies in your games when you play them, and we're going to talk about how to convert this into a win 100% of the time, because there's a specific technique. It's quite simple, but you need to know it. Once you know it, once you've practiced it, you can apply it in your games. So here we go. Just to introduce myself, my name is Philip. I'm a 2100 FIDE rated player from New Zealand, and I make these videos to help you improve your chess. Okay, so first and foremost, what is the Lucena position? Well, it's been up on the screen the whole time. As you can see, you have a passed pawn, and you want to make it into a queen. However, your king is in the way. And your king is cut off by the opponent's rook on one side, and cut off on the other side by the opponent's king. So you can't move your king and you can't queen your pawn. So what do? This is the technique. I'll show you and then I'll explain why it works. We play rook to f2. We're going to get that king away from the e file. The king moves across. And our next move, we want to play king to e7. However, we need to play another move in between. We play rook to f4. This is called building a bridge. This is the key concept in the Lucena position technique, and you have to put your rook on the 4th rank. This is the winning technique, and you'll see why in a second. So let's say black plays rook to c2. Now our idea is king to e7 here, and if black chases us with rook to e2 check, we play king to d6, check, king e6, check, king to d5, rook d2 check, and now our rook blocks the check. And black cannot stop us from making a queen on the next move. Now this is an important moment, because if we just go back a couple of moves, here black has played rook d2 check, we play king to e6. What if black simply drops the rook back, and essentially saying, well, you can't make a queen on your next move, so I'm not going to check you and fall into your trap or fall into your plans. Here, what we do is we play rook to f5. And our idea is simple. On the next move, we're just going to move our rook to d5, and then we can make a queen. Now, one more thing here. What if black played king to g6 instead? Because now, if we play rook to f5, black will simply take the pawn and draw the game. Well, what we do in this case is we play rook to f6, check, and now whichever way the king moves, g7 or g5, we play rook f5 check, and boom, there we go. Nice and easy. So now let's look at how this applies in real life games. Okay, so let's look at this position. We'll check out this second position soon. This is a pretty normal rook endgame, but if you can kind of see the patterns, if these pawns were to disappear, we would have a passed pawn here, and all we would need to ensure is that that black king cannot go onto that queening square, because that is where our king belongs. What we'd need to do is just cut off the king with our rook, and we would be good to go. Now, in this particular position, it's very hard to calculate every single move. Endgames are very tricky that way, especially rook endgames, but we can see the patterns, right? So now we start playing moves that might allow us to possibly enter a Lucena position if our opponent isn't careful. So we might play something like h5, and hoping if our opponent takes, we are going to get a passed h pawn at least. In this case, if our opponent gets, very excited and starts trading pawns and thinks they're going to draw, they might play f5, and here we might take, and after f takes, e takes f5, you can kind of see we're starting to get to a Lucena type position. So we'll play king e5, and now our opponent might play something like rook a5 check, d5, and g takes h5. And here, our opponent is essentially hoping for rook takes h5, and they're just going to drop back, and they're going to get into a nice defensive position here, and very well might draw the game. However, instead of taking that pawn, we are going to play king to e6 because we want our king there. We want to cut that black king off. And here black might recognize, actually, I have to be very careful. So black plays rook to a1, d6, king f8, and here instead of king to d7, we just simply take the pawn now. Because after king to e8, it's checkmate. So black cannot move the king any closer. This pawn's about to fall, and our king is about to go into that Lucena position. So you can kind of see how, if we just go right to the start of this position, it doesn't look like a Lucena position. It looks like a much more typical rook endgame, but it's understanding what end position you want to end up with allows you to select the right moves to shape the position and shape the game to get you to the Lucena position. Now let's just quickly look at the final position. We'll run through this very quickly. Hopefully you're seeing the pattern. We have a passed pawn down here, and if all of these pawns were missing, we would be in the Lucena position again, as long as our king is cutting off the black king and our king can reach the queening square. So essentially we would continue this game with that in mind. So we would play something like c5. If the black king moved to f6, we would play rook to e3 because we know we need to cut that king off. If that king can jump to c8, we're going to have a very hard time queening this pawn. So, you know, black might play rook d2 check, king c4, and then, I don't know, possibly rook to d8. Black's got to be very careful because the white rook can, so if I just go back one step here, white's rook can always go to c3 and block any checks on c2 as this pawn marches up the board. So maybe rook to d8, and we would just continue c6, king c5, and if there's any tricks, or let's just say black plays g5, here, takes, you can kind of see, right? We're getting closer and closer to that Lucena position. If the a-pawn falls, if we need to get rid of these kingside pawns, we are well and truly in the Lucena position. And again, we can very confidently say we know how to win this because we know the Lucena technique of building a bridge. The very last point is the Lucena position works when your pawn is on any file except the A file or the H file, simply because once black gets the rook onto the B or G file, your king really just has only one file to escape to, and it's very easy for black to keep your king locked up. And there we have it. Now you know the most important position in any rook endgame. Practice this one over and over because you need to get that technique ingrained into your muscle memory and apply it to your games. You're going to win so many more rook endgames, it's not even funny. Because rook endgames notoriously can end up as draws. Once you know this one, you'll be surprised. You will start converting so many more wins. So yeah, all the best in your games, and see you guys in the next video. Peace out.